When God begins preparing someone for a prophetic marriage, the very first thing he touches is not their relationship status, but their identity. Before he reshapes your union, he reshapes who you are. Because marriage, especially prophetic marriage, is not just the joining of two lonely hearts looking for companionship. It is the joining of two identities that are deeply rooted in Christ, two callings that must flow together to serve a greater kingdom purpose. And if your sense of identity is fractured, then what you bring to the altar will not be a covenant, it will be confusion. You see, identity is the foundation of intimacy. You can't expect to know someone deeply if you don't know yourself truthfully. Many of us approach relationships with a list of desires, expectations, and needs, but without first asking, who am I becoming in God's presence? If your identity is anchored in insecurity, then marriage becomes a place where you demand validation rather than share strength. If your identity is shaped by past wounds, then covenant becomes a mirror that constantly reflects your brokenness instead of healing it. But when God reshapes your identity in Him, marriage becomes a platform for purpose, not a playground for emotional survival. Think about how God worked with Adam. Before He brought Eve into the picture, He gave Adam responsibility, clarity, and identity. He gave him a place in the garden, an assignment to cultivate and guard, and a voice to name creation. Only after Adam understood his role did God say, "It is not good for man to be alone." That order matters. Adam was not ready for partnership until he was rooted in purpose. That pattern hasn't changed. God is still in the business of reshaping His sons and daughters, giving them clarity about who they are in Him before He entrusts them with covenant. And that reshaping process is not always gentle. Sometimes God has to strip away the false layers we've built around ourselves, identity shaped by culture, by failure, by trauma, or by performance. He has to teach you that your worth isn't determined by how many people notice you, how many likes you get, or even how quickly someone chooses you. He has to root your confidence in something unshakable. Your identity as His child, your assignment in His kingdom, and your character being refined by His Spirit. Because only then can you stand in a prophetic marriage without losing yourself in the other person. Now, don't misunderstand me. Identity in Christ does not mean perfection. It means wholeness. It means that you've allowed God to integrate your past, your pain, and your potential into a self-understanding that reflects His truth rather than your wounds. It means that instead of asking someone else to complete you, you show up already complete, ready to contribute to the covenant. This is why so many marriages fail. They are built on half-formed identities seeking completion rather than whole individuals seeking alignment. And here's the deeper truth: when God reshapes your identity, He is not just preparing you to be a spouse, He is preparing you to be a vessel. A prophetic marriage isn't about romance alone. It's about assignment. It's about two people who know who they are, who know whose they are, and who come together to multiply impact, not just emotions. If you don't know your identity, you won't know how to discern the difference between a relationship that looks good on the outside and a covenant that is ordained by God on the inside. So the first sign that God is getting you ready is this inner reshaping. You begin to feel God pulling you deeper into His Word, challenging your self-perception and confronting the lies you've believed about yourself. He forces you to stand alone for a season, not because He wants you isolated, but because He wants you grounded. He is shaping your spiritual backbone so that when He places you in covenant, you won't crumble under the weight of the assignment. That's why some of you right now feel a tension inside, an unsettledness with the old version of yourself. That's not a crisis, that's construction. That's God reshaping the clay. And the more you resist trying to define yourself through relationships, titles, or achievements, the more space you give Him to carve out your true identity. Because in the end, the truth is simple. Before God gives you someone to walk with, He makes sure you know how to stand on your own. If you miss that, you will always walk into relationships looking for someone to fill a void only God can fill. But if you embrace it, then when the time comes, you won't enter marriage needy. You'll enter marriage ready. So let me leave you with this: the greatest gift you can bring to your future spouse is not your beauty, your charm, or your ambition. It is your God-shaped identity. Because when you know who you are in Him, no season, no struggle, no storm, and no person can take that away. When God begins preparing you for a prophetic marriage, one of the most overlooked yet undeniable signs is the season of divine separation. And I want you to hear me clearly. This is not simply about relationships ending or doors closing. This is about God rearranging the environment of your life so that you are positioned for His purpose. Sometimes the greatest preparation doesn't come through addition, it comes through subtraction. God has to clear the stage before he introduces the covenant. Many of us resist this season because separation feels like loss. When friends drift away, when someone you thought was the one suddenly exits, when the social circles you used to thrive in no longer feel like home, it can feel as though something went wrong. But with God, removal is not rejection, it's redirection. If he is truly preparing you for something prophetic, then he cannot allow you to remain entangled in relationships, habits, or patterns that distort your vision or compromise your calling. Think about Abraham. Before God could make him the father of nations, he told him, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." Separation was the first step toward covenant blessing, not because Abraham's family was inherently evil, but because the next level of God's promise required him to detach from the old environment. God often does the same with us. He separates us not because people are always wrong, but because alignment is critical. You cannot step into prophetic destiny while holding on to connections that keep you tied to the past. Now, here's the psychological depth to this separation is not just about who leaves your life, it's also about what leaves your heart. God may separate you from the approval of others, from the comfort of old habits, from the need to be validated by a crowd. Because prophetic marriage is not about performance, it's about purpose. If your identity and direction are still tied to pleasing people, then covenant will crush you. So God teaches you, sometimes painfully, to walk through seasons where it feels like you're alone. He does this so you'll learn to stand secure in him, not in the applause, not in the relationship status, not in the temporary affirmation of others. And let's be real, separation hurts. It's supposed to. Because it digs at our attachments, it exposes where we've placed our trust. If you've ever gone through a breakup you didn't want, or if you've had friends suddenly disappear, you know that ache. But could it be that the ache was actually the evidence of God's hand? Could it be that the absence was not punishment, but preparation? You see, God never subtracts without the intention to multiply. If he's pulling someone or something out of your life, it's because that presence could not coexist with the promise he's about to give you. Philosophically, separation is God's way of refining focus. When you're surrounded by too many voices, you can't distinguish the voice of God. But when he allows you to be stripped down to stillness, you begin to hear him more clearly. Prophetic marriages are birthed out of clarity, not chaos. You need that stillness, that silence, that solitude to recognize his hand when he brings alignment. And this is why some of you right now are in the middle of a divine pulling away. You may not have words for it, but you feel it. Relationships are fading, doors are closing, circles are shrinking. Don't misinterpret that. That is not God punishing you. That is God pruning you. He's removing the branches that no longer bear fruit so that when he does bring you into covenant, you're not weighed down by unnecessary baggage. The truth is, a prophetic marriage requires space. Space in your heart, space in your mind, space in your soul. And God creates that space through separation. He has to empty out what doesn't belong so he can fill you with what does. If you don't go through the emptying, you'll end up crowding out the blessing with leftovers from the past. So if you're in that season, don't rush to replace what was removed. Don't run back to the very thing God pulled you away from. Let him do the surgery. Let him create the margin. Because what feels like loneliness today